Part 3 of our final discussion session for communication and cultural change. And we're going to look at some questions from John as we mosey our way through discussion of the content in this course. Drawing on the complex TV chapter, John writes, as the author describes soap operas, he makes a comment that they are intended for unsophisticated housewives. Many of us know what he means by this label. In your opinion, in your opinion, has the number of viewers decreased, assuming we're talking about soap operas, due to more women in the workforce today? Sure. Or has the viewing numbers increased even more due to DVR and other recording devices available? I think something we can appreciate is ultimately the harkening back to our discussions in other courses about the spreadable media model, in that there are multiple ways and multiple devices and multiple mediums with which we can consume certain types of media content. And so overall, yes, soap opera ratings have declined, but I don't know that we are making up for that by viewing them through different types of devices or time shifting and that sort of thing. I don't hear a lot of people talking about that. What would be the reason television shows such as Hill Street Blues, Dallas, St. Elsewhere, and so on, hits of the 80s, did not continue, but soap operas, the daytime soap opera, has continued in their viewing capabilities. Okay, so this reminds me, Mattel goes into some meticulous description of production model processes, all right? So shifting audience expectations, and specifically how the soap opera is by design a more industrialized mode of production, whereas the melodrama in recent years, especially with these shortened seasons, is more of this sort of artistic effort, right? The auteur approach to television making, and that's an important distinction to consider as oppositional in some ways. And there's also genre norms, right? The norms of these different things to think about. John has a question about the Ink and Letters special issue on transitions, right? So there was the chapter we read entitled Television Transitions. The phrase, quote, darker edged characters crept closer into mainstream consciousness, end quote, is mentioned as an explanation in the transition of television. How many television shows or movies have we witnessed in the past 10 years that include these dark-edged characters? And why does the audience viewer find them so attractive? First answer, shortest answer, too many to count. And although we could technically quantify them, too many to count in an entertaining fashion, right? In a sort of asynchronous video lecture. But why do we find them so attractive? It goes back to the kinds of literary tensions that gray characters can create, right? That anti-heroes are more interesting, so says the argument, than vanilla characters, all right? And so morally ambiguous characters are more exciting because they are both unpredictable, right? So unpredictable for the audiences, yet that also makes them more relatable. They're unpredictable and more relatable. And thus, you know, that formula tells us they are more human. So the drama takes on, even in its most fanciful forms, a deeper sense of realism, which is an aspect necessary to consider when talking about the TV drama. Can we see the politics of masculinity, quote unquote, in television shows such as SWAT and SEAL Team, and the ability of television producers to draw more male viewers on specific nights to television? So talking about some of the shows, say, that CBS, for example, has produced in the last year, oftentimes the characters CBS produces in their series are, quote unquote, safe brands of masculine representation. I think to the whole array, the CISs, the NCISs, the CSIs, and so on and so on. I mean, there's some clear archetypal formulas used for a great majority of these characters, and they oftentimes reflect the values of the viewer demographic, and don't dance too far away from those boundaries. And so just as other, say, cable and pay cable channels are writing characters and writing stories that is meant to appeal to those that want to be sort of pushed further and further and asked, tougher questions about right versus wrong, morality, values, ethics, and so on. Looking at the Friday Night Lights chapter, once again, the author uses God term in this chapter to express how some shows bring emotion to the viewers. Is it right to bring faith to a show when there are issues at hand such as death, illness, accidents, and so on? And so to break down this question into a couple of different parts, when I hear the term right, as it's contextualized here, is it right to bring faith to a show? This is, a value judgment, okay? And so different viewers, different producers, different writers could have different values or reasons or rationales to bring up these themes. And these are also human themes, though, so they're the raw materials of storytelling. But when there are real-world kinds of issues, these types of issues occur in real world settings, and they occur in fictional settings, and so we're going to encounter these whether it is in various forms of communication. Would it also not be proper to bring faith into a show to express gratitude during a time of happiness and being grateful? So where's the faith, right? Where's the love? On television, in the story. And there are instances where I definitely see writers exploring that terrain in a range of ways. Lost played with this in a very ambiguous type of manner. The same co-creator, Damon Lindelof, later co-created The Leftovers for HBO, and that is a series that deals with issues of faith, issues of a lack of faith, and a host of emotional experiences, trauma, and so on. HBO also produced a lesser talked about series in the mid-2000s called Big Love. And Big Love, probably a reason it's a little bit under the radar, it focuses on a kind of offshoot family of LDS, right? So they're not quite LDS, they're able to, it's probably for legal and narrative purposes, but explore dimensions of faith and even virtues in ways that few shows do, honestly. I think back to when the CW was called the WB, and they had a show that ran for years and years, Seventh Heaven, and this was one of those more of a warm and bubbly, morally upright text that was, again, a little bit ubiquitous in its representation of a specific sect of Christianity, so that it could have the freedom to explore a range of human issues, not unlike the way Big Love would do that. And so even there's a show that definitely dances with a lot of these metaphysical and existential issues. Limited series that just came out last year called The Young Pope on HBO, and it is a fascinating text. It's not for all audiences, as you can imagine with an HBO drama, but I think it investigates and reflects and meditates on spiritual concerns and morality at a deep level throughout that series, and it's very provocative filmmaking, if we want to shift gears and call it call it that. And then even there's, your simpler fare, a show like Duck Dynasty or whatever, has a platform and has an audience, and clearly seems to connect to that audience in that way. Okay. John wrote a couple of great questions about TV screenings for week 4. So excited to always see those types of questions pop up. There have been several television shows which portray the President of the United States. This show, The West Wing, is no different. In episode viewed, their other characters seem to share more of the limelight. What is different from this primetime show and a soap? Okay, so again, we've engaged this a little bit, but I tried to bracket off some criteria here. What's the difference between primetime, drama that's soapy, like The West Wing, versus an actual soap opera in the daytime? And I would say this. First of all, the production model, as I've talked about in some previous moments, the production model is designed entirely different in terms of including schedule, shooting, number of episodes, and so on. The schedule, the budget for the series. Okay, so you're going to see lavish production design and expense for The West Wing. You're going to see stripped down, very basic and affordable production design for a soap opera, limited sets. And while The West Wing would have limited sets, most TV shows have a limited amount of sets. You're trying to do more, maybe with the drama in prime time. The quality, not the quantity, but the quality of the acting or performances, as well as the direction and even the writing, is going to be different. All right, so West Wing was notorious, and it would win just endless awards for its writing, its ability to weave metaphor and allegory and real world themes into its fictional but realistic setting. Whereas soap operas are intentionally formulaic, they're intentionally kind of hyper real. There's a weird play of time that happens. Characters get into ridiculous circumstances on a habitual basis. All of the things that come there. Okay, so that gives us a few different things to chew on. Most soap operas are not viewable on Netflix. So what distinguishes a West Wing to be popular enough to be viewed on Netflix after years after its syndication, right? So great job bringing this term back into the fold, syndication. So there is the original run time slots for when TV shows first premiere, and then if they're successful enough, and traditionally they need to hit around that 4th or 5th season 100 episode mark as the stamp of approval for syndication. And so what syndication did is, then syndication is the new next phase of creating or monetizing the program. So then it's something sold into syndication. It airs, let's say, the afternoon hours endlessly, right? Your repeats on TBS of The Office, or Saved by the Bell running all times of the afternoon hour, Full House, and so on, right? These are syndicated series at this point after initial broadcast runs. And so what we now see is they're immediately negotiated and sold in not by the broadcasters, but by the production companies off to streaming services. Okay, so streaming services